You had to be struggling a little bit while I was sitting there, so I understand how you feel. So I promise I'm not going to be, I'm not going to overdo it. What I would like to do is just share some practical thoughts that have been helpful to me. You know, I've been a Christian for 44 years. I'm kind of proud of it, and I almost hardly believe it. Because it seems like it can't have been that long, but it was when I check it out. And I've been through metamorphosis. You never stay the same place as a person, and even as a Christian, your understanding grows and your experience changes. And sometimes the more you learn, the more you progress, the more you remain at the same place, because you recognize that the things you are learning are simply expanding on some things you knew from the very beginning. I've come to the conclusion that the day I became a Christian, I was saved. I've spent 44 years learning how to walk in that salvation, not trying to learn how to be saved. I knew I was saved from the beginning. I've never lost that conviction. Praise the Lord. I never lost it, because from the beginning, the way I became a Christian, I learned that it was through the goodness of God. It was God's grace. And in all the struggles and the batterings I've had, I've always known it is God and not I. But sometimes I admit I have been challenged and a little frustrated, because I feel that the expression of my Christianity is not equal to the assurance of my Christianity. I know that I have salvation, but sometimes I'm not satisfied with the way my life is lived. I remember reading an incident where a zealous young Christian, he was in college. He went to one of his batchmates, and he said, he was trying to share the gospel. He said, "What will happen to you if you die tomorrow?" And the guy looked at him and said, "What if I live?" And that kind of blew him away. He never thought of that. What if I live? Because a lot of the emphasis in Christianity is about how to be saved. But I find myself more burdened about how to live. Amen. Because I've never had occasion to be concerned about my being saved since I became a Christian. But I've often felt disappointed, because I want to be and I want to do, because I know I have a job. I have a task to represent the Lord and to save people. And when I feel that I'm failing in that mission, I feel frustrated. But, every day the Lord reminds me of things that I know and points out things that I should have understood a little better. And so, as I said, I just want to talk about some practical aspects of how to live as a Christian that at least have benefited me in my mind, even if they have not had their maximum effect in my life. But I think I appreciate the way the Lord leads me and the way He helps me to become a little better every step of the way. But this evening I want to talk about denial and acceptance. And I want to begin with that very well-known verse in Luke 9 and verse 23, where Jesus said, it reads, "And He said to them all, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me." Self-denial is a painful thing. I don't know if anybody has ever thought of self-denial and had happy expectations. I don't know. Unless you never had an adequate concept of what it means. But self-denial requires usually suffering. It requires deprivation. And very often, it requires feelings of regret. Because self-denial, by definition, by the very label, focuses on saying no to me. And my life is made up of me. My life is made up of me. And the things I anticipate are made up of what I expect to make me happy, of my prospects, my goals, my perspectives. Self-denial essentially is a statement that says, I intend to give up all of this. And it's not usually a happy prospect when you talk about self-denial. So when Jesus says that if you are going to be his disciple, you have to deny yourself or you cannot be his disciple. He says you have to take up the cross, and the very thought of a cross, what a cross means. A cross means death by slow, tortuous suffering. And that is the symbol that Jesus chose to use to represent our experience with him. How we can become a Christian, how we can not become a Christian, how we can become his disciples. Take up the cross every day and follow me, or else you cannot be my disciple. And maybe that is one of the reasons why so many people shy away from Christianity. Now, even if we decide that we want to do this, there are challenges because, look, you can't even keep your eye on what you want to do and what you find pleasurable, far more what you find painful and unpleasurable. There are so many distractions. I mean, even in my own home, I'm trying to keep my mind where it should be, and sometimes I'm passing, and my wife may be watching the TV, and something catches my attention, and I stop to watch, and in a moment, your mind is gone from where you want it to be. There are distractions even on that most basic level. There are distractions on a macro level. There is somebody coming to you with a business proposition. There's somebody coming to you and showing you something that is very, very inviting and exciting. And there are so many things calling for your attention, and there is the stark, bare, painful statement of Jesus that you must deny yourself and take up the cross every day, or you cannot be his disciple. So we do have a challenge. I look at myself as a Christian for 44 years, and if I think of it in this way, I'm thinking, I know why it has been so difficult to get to where I want to be. You have personal desire, you have personal desires, you have personal preferences, you have priorities, and they are impossible to ignore while you are alive. I would like to die. I would like to give up myself. But what do I do with my dreams? What do I do with my plans to go to school and get a diploma or a degree? What do I do with my plans to buy a home? What do I do with my plans to make a name for myself? What do I do with these things? Are not these the things that drive and orient our lives? And why does Jesus have to be so uncompromising in his statement like this? And does he really mean this? Is there not an easier way to become what we ought to be? I challenge you with the thought that the people who have been really outstanding in the kingdom of God have been the people who have been able to step into this kind of channel. I suggest to you that this is not the way of salvation, but it's the way of discipleship. It's the way of moving from the Christian life that assures you of the kingdom, but leaves you dissatisfied and wanting more. That's what Jesus was saying, because to be his disciple, I think he was talking about the channel of being like him in the world. And, I'm making a distinction because sometimes we confuse the two things. One of the things that happened to me when I began to understand righteousness by faith was that I admit that I became a little less self-sacrificing. I became a little less focused on the things that you need to be involved in. In other words, for a while, it seemed to me, when I understood righteousness by faith and the gift of God, it seemed to me like the Christian life is a life where God takes you over, and your involvement is gone, and it's smooth sailing, like you're running automatic. I never said it and I never believed it. But subconsciously, it's like my mind steps into this place. Because I came to understand, for many years of my life, I thought as a Christian, the way to salvation is the way of hard work. You have heard me say that I was on a quest for perfection. I was. But the thing is, it was how I understood that perfection. Perfection was like a series of activities leading to an end point. And I just never could get to that end point because I could never get the activities perfectly right. Sometimes you can get one thing right. You can start eating properly. You can start dressing properly. You can kneel for every prayer. You can make sure you get rid of all jewelry. But then you lose your temper. Then you shout at your wife. Then you get irritated by somebody in traffic. The process never is complete, so you can say, I've reached the end of the road, unless you are very deluded. I was kind of like that for a long time. I never saw it as a necessity for salvation, but I saw it as the purpose of my life to go towards that perfect mark. And then I found righteousness by faith, and I discovered that when you become a Christian, you are at the end of the road. You're not reaching for perfection. You, in Christ, you're already complete. You're perfect. And for a while, I think it kind of affected me. It's so beautiful and it is so true. For a time, I backed away to some extent from the practical aspects of how to live the Christian life. Never went back to the mud hole, but still I relaxed. And I do believe that in Jesus you find relaxation because the yoke is easy and the burden is light. And he says, come to me and I will give you rest. But in looking at things and revisiting things recently, I've come to see that there is another aspect to the way of the Christian life that I don't want to lose sight of, that we don't need to lose sight of. Because the truth is, while a Christian should never be concerned about his salvation, you should live in that place of assurance. Because the beauty of grace, it's past amazing. When I came to understand grace, when I came to understand the love and the gift of God, that God says, I'm doing something for you that you don't imagine. I am going to save you without you. When I came to understand it this way, it blew my mind. I'm going to save you without you. I'm going to find a way to save you and take you out of the equation. Because if you are in it, you'll never make it. And I discovered that what he did, he would save me outside of myself through his son Jesus Christ. He saved me, and it had nothing to do with me. My only involvement is, can I believe? That was amazing. And it was so good. It almost made me forget that now that I'm in his family, it's my privilege to represent him and to speak of him and to express him everywhere I go, not for salvation, but just because I'm family. Just because I'm in the family. And that is a challenge that probably still bothers me a little bit. I feel like we have the mandate and the ability to take on the world and win. We do. But we, first of all, do not see the necessity, and secondly, do not see the how. How can it be done? What has God done to make it possible? What does he expect of me? So, I'm talking about this self-denial and how difficult it is. And I'm realizing that the root of there are some obstacles to self-denial which I want to point out, because as I said, I just want to talk about some practical things, because Jesus says if you are to be his disciple, the key is to deny yourself. And that in contemplation, that seems straightforward and simple. My problem is that I am living, right? I am alive. And why am I alive? Because I have my agenda, my program, my perspectives, my desires. That is me. That is what keeps me alive and keeps me in the driver's seat. Me, I am the whole problem. That's what Jesus says. That's what the Bible says. Paul says, I'm crucified with Christ. That's the problem. But the question is, how do I come to the place where I no longer am in the forefront of the equation? How do I do this? And the truth is that it seems to be a very painful thing for me to get out of the way. You can't ask me to relinquish my whole lifetime of dreams. You can't ask me to do this. My whole lifetime of dreams? What, to put somebody else in the place, in the driver's seat, to take away my autonomy in my life? How do you expect this of me? And, it's related to what I was trying to say this morning. This morning I was saying that the whole foundation of everything in Christianity is to understand that God is love. I like to use this illustration. My wife and I, we got married under very crazy circumstances because I was young and I read too many books. Right, we kind of eloped. Took her away from her mother and her family, ran away with me. And for years, her family would not speak to her. But, I remember because she was in Canada and she came home to Jamaica, wanted to get married, her mother refused, and so we ran off. She never went back to Canada. She has been with me ever since for 40 years now. When I think back on it, I think God is so good, because when you get married like that, it lasts about 2 years most of the time. But I was a Christian, though I was a crazy Christian because I was too young to have any sense. I wasn't so young, but still, I read too many books. And, I think of her because when she left Canada, she gave up everything. I remember I went in the room one day and I saw her crying. And she was tearing up her return ticket. Tore up her return ticket. She left her bank account, everything. From that moment that she decided to stay, everything that happened in her life depended on me. If I went down, she went down. If I went up, she went up. Anywhere I went in life, she was going. She gave up her dreams. Everything that she wanted in life. Why? Because in her mind, she found a greater love. And that greater love meant so much to her. She gave up everything from her past. Which sometimes is why, when I think she's so aggravating and she doesn't listen, I remember what she did. And everything fades away. And I say, no matter what, I have to give her that respect all her life. So, this is kind of the issue. This is something like what Jesus is saying. And the problem is, I asked myself, why would you do this something? Number one, she loved me, right? And I loved her too. But love caused this craziness. Because of love, I know she was riding on the bike. We were riding on the bike back through the district where she used to live. And people came out and they were pointing. That's her. She's the girl who gave up Canada for this. Right? They would point when we were passing, and she took everything for love. But it wasn't just love. It was trust. Because I could have said at any time, I'm tired of her, I'm going to go divorce somebody else. I'm going to divorce her and go to somebody else. I mean, you have to really trust somebody to put yourself so entirely into their hand. The only thing she had in Jamaica was me. Because all the family she had left in Jamaica turned against her. In fact, they got the police to come and come for me one day. I was in church. They came for me to say I had kidnapped her. And they took me to the police station. I had to go and get her to the station. And we told the police the whole story. And he was sympathetic. They took us to the immigration officer. They said she had to go back because she wasn't born in Jamaica. But we went to the immigration officer, and he was a romantic person. He had sympathy with love.
Oh, man.
He said, let me see the passport. And on the passport it said landed. For some reason they landed her in Jamaica. And he said, she's landed. She can stay as long as she wants. And so the family had to go back and they said, okay, that's it, nothing else. I mean, her stepfather pointed to my face and said, you, anything that happens from now, you're responsible. I want you to know. So it was terrible. When I think back on it today, I said, I was out of my mind. But, I mean, sometimes God allows things because he sees our hearts, you know. But the reason is, on her part, I think of her part of it, and I know it was because of love and trust. It was love and trust. You don't do this. You don't throw yourself so completely into the hands of another person. Give up everything. The only thing that can make you do that is a love that is a little more than you can understand, and trust that is absolute. And when I think of that experience, I kind of understand what the Lord is asking and why it is so difficult. We say we love him, but how much do we really love him? You love in proportion to how much you appreciate and understand what he has done for you. And when we think of grace, sometimes we get a glimpse of that picture. But the second part of it is also important. You know, the day I became a Christian, there were two verses that were at the foundation of me becoming a Christian, because I got myself in a lot of trouble. No way out. For 3 days I contemplated suicide. On the third day, two verses, right? The first one is in Romans. These two verses I'll never forget. You know it well. It's Romans 8. It says, all things work together for good to them that love God. I did not love God. And I said, I don't know how this can help me because I don't love you. But then I thought, if I learn to love you, this disaster that I'm facing will work for my good. And so that made me get a little glimmer of hope about becoming a Christian. And the second verse was in Proverbs chapter 5. I learned these things when I was in Sabbath school as a boy. But I left religion when I was 17, and for 5 years I was out there, and I was even telling people that I didn't believe in God. But here comes this disaster, and I have nowhere to turn but to God. And Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Those two passages shed a light into my soul, and I thought, in the midst of this misery, if I acknowledge him, if I turn my life over to him, he will take over and make some sense out of my life. And so from that moment, it stuck in my mind that what God is asking for is the trust. The trust that makes me say, I can give up my dreams. I can give up my future. I can give up my disasters. I can give up my bad and my good. I can put myself in your hand and cast myself on your mercy. And it's going to work out for the best. I'm sometimes so sorry that I let him down, because in 40 years, it has been absolutely true. I have never had a moment when I can say, I trusted you and you let me down. You are willing to give up yourself, to give up your dreams, if you trust that the person who asks you to do it has something better for you. You can't see it. Everything looks like a disaster. And you trust him. You trust him like Daniel in the lion's den, or like David facing the lion and the bear, or like, I mean, when you think of, even I mentioned David and the lion and the bear, it's one of the most astonishing stories in the Bible, as simple as you take it, right? If you're watching your father's sheep and a lion, you hear a lion making a little noise, what do?
Protect your lamb.
You protect your lamb? I head for home as fast as I can. Unless I have a high-powered rifle. If a lion comes, if a wolf is different, but if a lion comes calling, I'm off. I'm not going to rush the lion and grab him by his beard. You're out of your mind. David says, I grabbed him by his beard. I smote him. How do you smite a lion? What on earth happened in that encounter? It happened with a lion and it happened with a bear. And plus he was a youth. What gives a man this crazy idea that he's to attack a lion bare-handed? Look here. David was like my little brother Paul. He didn't have enough sense to be scared. Okay. We were going to the beach. We were passing this yard where there was a man who was a butcher. He had 8 bad dogs. And we were passing. We always went on tiptoe, me and my brothers. I was about 10 at the time. My little brother may have been about 6. We go past the yard on tiptoe. And we hope the dogs don't hear, but the gate is open. And after we pass, here come the 6 dogs running out. And me, Orly, Tony, Don, Charles, we took off at full speed. I look back, and there's my little brother Paul, charging the dogs at full speed. He's running at the dogs full speed. I stop, and I'm thinking, he's dead. And the pack of dogs turned and ran right back into the yard.
Oh, man.
And all I can think is, God can't let down somebody who well, I don't know if my little brother was just stupid or he was thinking of God. But when I applied to David, I'm thinking, when somebody trusts God so much that he knows God cannot fail me, God just can't let you down. Can't let you down. You know the time when you try your best to be strong? It's when your child comes and says, my daddy can do that. Then you will kill yourself, because how do you let down the kid? And it's like David says, come, Mr. Lion. Let me show you what my God can do. Somehow, in some unbelievable way, the young man killed the lion after grabbing his beard. Oh my goodness. This is what God says. God says, if you trust in me with all your heart, you will never be afraid to put yourself in my hand. We struggle because we find it hard to trust in God. And we find it hard to trust in him. One of the reasons is we don't really know the kind of character he is. We don't know his character. We don't understand the way he feels about us and what he wants for us. We choose to maintain our right to decide. We choose to trust our ability to perform. But here's a verse that gives us a clue as to what makes the difference, all right? Look at what Paul says in Galatians 2 and verse 20. We can quote it if we wish, because we all know it by faith. He says, I am crucified with Christ. And what next? Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. It is one thing to die. Death is a fearsome prospect. But how does it feel to live? How does it feel to live? You know, it's one thing to know that I'm going to go under an operation. But if when the operation is over, I'm going to be 5 times stronger and 10 times more healthy, and I'm sure that it will work. Look, I will take the pain. Give me the needle and the knife, if that is a certain consequence, right? But when you ask me to take the needle and the knife with nothing behind it, oh my goodness, that's painful, man. When you ask me to focus on death and not on life, that's too hard. It's hard to die. It's like when you fast, you tell me do without food for 24 hours. Oh, goodness me, I'm going to be there with my belly rumbling. And I'm going to be wishing I had a nice meal. You know, you can't even concentrate. You feel lightheaded. Have you ever felt like that when you went to fasting? Let me tell you something that happened to me one night years ago. I was about 14. I had a toothache. No, not 14. It was since I became a Christian. So I was in my 20s perhaps. But I had a toothache. And I'm one of those persons. I don't want to use drugs. I don't like to use drugs. I didn't decide to take any pills. So I had this toothache. Started about 8 o'clock. Really knifing me. It's 10 o'clock at night and I can't get a break from this toothache. And at 10 o'clock I say, Father, can't you just take away this toothache? You know what I heard? I heard like he spoke. He said, whatever I give you to bear, I will bear it with you. Look here. I had that toothache all night, so bad that I couldn't sleep. It was there until 4 o'clock in the morning. And from that moment, from 10 o'clock when I heard that word, the toothache became my friend. Every time I felt it throb, I remember that the Lord was in the room. My night was filled with the presence of God because of the toothache. 4 o'clock in the morning, it stopped, and I was almost sorry. The thing that makes the difference is if you focus, it's what you're focused on and what you know is coming out of this. I heard somebody say, as you go through life, my friend, whatever be your goal, keep your eye upon the donut and not upon the hole. But it's a little bit more than that, right? It's not just the donut instead of the hole. It's what comes at the end of this experience, right? You can go under the knife because of what does it say of Christ? For the joy that was set before him, right? He endured the what? Did he say the cross? He endured the cross for the joy that was set before him. You have to ask yourself, what happens when I die? What happens when I take up the cross? If you contemplate the taking up of the cross, you will never take it up. If your eye is upon the life that arises out of that experience of death, it's far more beautiful and far more acceptable. If you go to a day of fasting and you're thinking of the deprivation, you will suffer. If you go to a day of fasting and your focus is on experiencing more of Christ, you won't even be hungry. It is the joy that is set before us. Christ, God does not take away anything from us without giving us something better. Amen. If God says, don't go to college, you're going to get something better. If God says, don't buy this house, don't buy this car, don't get married to this person, something better is in your life. And faith can say, thank you, Lord, even when you are under the knife and you're feeling the pain. So, what I'm saying is that self-denial, I believe, is the great key to living the life of Christ. But we never experience it because we never really deny self, because we are focused on the pain instead of what lies beyond that pain. God intends to give us something better, but we have to trust Him before we can take the step that is necessary. Dying for the sake of death is painful. It's hard. It causes resentment. But we are to focus on living, not dying, even though we must go through that experience of death before we can live. You're already alive, right? You were born into this world. You have been living this life, in my case, for 67 years. It takes a lot for 67 years to say everything that you have learned, put it aside. You know nothing. What enters your experience at this point is the will of God. Is God taking over my life and directing me from this point on, and I give myself into that process because I trust Him. That is what He's asking for. Like I said, I just want to touch on some practical things, and so I'm going to apply this in a practical way. I believe that all of us are aware of what I'm trying to say here, and all of us, to some degree or the other, have made denial of self. We have made sacrifices. If nothing more, you have decided to give up working on Sabbath. If nothing more, you have decided to give up some of the things that you used to find pleasure in to become a Christian. But I'm going to put something to you. And this is where I think that I myself recognize that I've fallen back a little bit. Because Jesus says that if you are faithful in little, you'll be faithful in much. It's easy to be faithful in the big things, because I know none of you is going to break anybody's house, right? And none of you is going to go and commit adultery. And you're not going to kill anybody. And you're not going to go and work on Sabbath. Because those things are the big things. But self-denial means the way you treat your hair. Self-denial means the kind of food I eat. Self-denial means how I speak to my wife or my husband. Self-denial means how I behave when I'm in an argument and I feel that I'm being disrespected. Self-denial is not your activity. It's your attitude to life and to yourself. And the little things demonstrate where you are really at. Because even the heathen conform in the big things. They do not bring their lives under the yoke. They bring their activities under the yoke to some extent. The person who really dies in Christ does not change his activities. He changes his life. He changes who is living. And so little things don't overcome you. You are not only good on the big things, but it becomes a lifestyle where your existence changes because of who is living. The failure in the small things demonstrate that you are trying to give Christ lip service. You are giving him a part of your life and you're holding on to the kernel. It will never work. It will never bring anything except frustration until we learn to not deny our activities, but deny ourselves. One of the facades one of the deceptions Satan puts in our way is we start to submit to the rules instead of to the person. That's why legalism is so bad. It makes you obey 10 rules or even 100 rules, but you are still in control of your life. Do you think you're any better off?
No.
And that's why legalism is so bad, because the truth is we need to hear the voice of Christ. We need to hear him speaking to us in this moment. We need to be in a relationship with him where we are sensitive to what he's saying, sensitive to his desires, to the little whims, sensitive that we can understand. Sometimes it's not what other people say is right, or what the book says is right, or what the law says is right. It's Christ, my life, directing me at this moment. That's what it is. It's walking with a person instead of the person's rules. It's not the ways of Christ. It's Christ himself. That's what it means to submit to him and to die with him. That's why Jesus says, and this is the way the Lord has been verbalizing it in my mind. Jesus says, take my yoke. And I'm labeling this concept coming under the yoke, because I realize that's what I want and that's how I think about it, coming under the yoke. Because what a yoke does is it binds you to another person, to another entity in such a way that you don't have the power to make your own choices. That's what a yoke is. You tie two donkeys together or two horses together. Where the stronger one goes, the other one has no choice. You have to go. Whether you like it or not, you better give up your mind and your dreams, because the stronger one is carrying you along on his course. And I want the yoke of Christ. I want him to live. I want to give up myself. And it's not easy, because it takes trust. It takes absolute trust. It takes something to believe. that if I give away me, you will come and make me live while I'm still dead. Make me live a far happier, more fulfilling life, and my existence, my old life, is taken out of the way. The last thing I'm going to say. The Lord has helped me to see this from an interesting perspective, because I say interesting because one of the hallmarks of my life, and maybe the life of my family in general, I would never have made a very good American because by nature, I'm a little indisciplined. I mean, I was often late for work when I used to be a school teacher. I would sometimes not finish my lesson plans. I was a little bit helter-skelter. I wasn't very disciplined. I admire people who are very disciplined, although sometimes they make me cringe a little bit. But I understand discipline. But the Lord has been saying to me that you can never wear the yoke of Christ and remain in discipline. Because discipline means I don't have the power anymore to choose. Surrender means I don't have the power anymore to choose. So if somebody says to you, do this, why would you sit still? Why would you refrain from doing it and doing it instantly? Because of myself still being alive. In the life of the Christian, there is the most perfect discipline. And when I began to see this, I began to see things a little better. I saw that what I was looking for all these years, reaching for perfection, I don't need to give it up. But the only thing I need to do, I saw perfection as the end of the road. But you know the truth? Perfection is this moment. Because perfection simply means doing at this moment, preaching this message, giving this illustration, eating this meal to the honor and glory of God. The best way I can eat this food, the best way I can represent the Lord in this meal, the best way I can brush my teeth, the best way I can comb my hair, because it is Him living, and everything I do for His honor and glory. Everything the best way. This moment is perfection. The goal is not the target. The goal is the process. Perfection is living with Jesus in this moment. And so I realized I have what I was looking for. Never understood it. Because I never understood that the goal is Christ. I thought the goal was flawless conformity to a set of rules. When would I ever get there? But when the goal is Christ, when the end of the road is a process, I have found my goal in life. When I've found this place of submissiveness to Christ. So, you ask, how do I do this? I'm going to give you a secular person's response. I'm so caught up in this idea that I started even looking at secular counsel about discipline, because I've been undisciplined and I want to be perfect because Jesus, I want Him to have His way. And I was reading a little book by a man named Jocko Willink. But he was one of the most outstanding American soldiers in the Iraqi war, got the most highly decorated. But you know what he says simply? He says, you don't have courage and you want courage. You say, Lord, make me courageous. Be courageous. You say, Lord, I'm not strong. You want to be strong. Be strong. You say, I wish I could start an exercise program and get healthy. Start the program. How hard is that? You sit down and wish and hope and want to. Do it. It's as simple as ABC. You will never do it by wishing and dreaming and hoping. You are supposed to go and look for that sick brother. Go! But you don't go because in your mind, you are still in charge. You are still in charge, and I think I'm going to just watch this program first. I'm going to read this book first. The Lord says, go. Go. You can go. You have the ability. You have the enabling. You have the instruction. You want to be a strong Christian. Be strong. Do what the Lord instructs you to do. There's nothing else to it. And I'm not talking about for salvation because you have salvation already. I'm talking about for living, for representing the Lord. It's as simple as ABC. You want to start a ministry in Orlando? Do it! That's all there is to it. And nothing happens because we think and we if and we but and we perhaps and maybe and wait for something to happen or for my mind to change. You only have one question: what does the Lord want? And do it. The consequences are not your business. And how it's going to turn out is not your business. You are under the yoke. And the Lord is the one who directs the course. Whatever He asks you to do, you are able to do. So just do it. So I hope you are blessed, because I know these thoughts have made an impact on me, which I hope to be, even at 67, to be life-changing. I'm not 80 yet. Moses was 80 when he started. Sometimes I'm telling myself, you're getting older now, you're past your prime. When I think of this like this, I say, that's a lie. I still have energy. Amen. I'm still exercising every morning because I just do it. And I'm feeling stronger. I have a lot left in me. Amen. I can still change the world. Amen. Because the Lord is on my side and I have the ability to just do it. Amen. So I hope you are encouraged. I'm going to close this part with a prayer, and then we're going to have the baptism. So just bow your heads with me, please.